so that I don't be buttoning your meeting, is that Good Journal gonna be on up to date? Did you get my letter?
Did I get it?
Did you get the email? I
Good
sent?
morning.
I'm not sure if I did this morning.
Jesse, I will call you after this meeting and talk to you about that.
Okay, then, so I don't need to talk right now. Okay, then I came on for that. Okay.
Yeah, this is not the appropriate time for that.
Give me a call. Okay, then, thank you.
Since we have a quorum, we're going to go ahead and get started. STL, you have us ready to go?
You're ready to go.
Okay. The Public Safety Committee meeting is called to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Boyd,
Present.
Alderwoman Howard,
Present.
Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderman Muhammad, Alderwoman Boyd,
Present.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Here.
Chairman Vaquero.
Present.
5 present, you have quorum.
Okay, we need the approval of the minutes from the January 19th meeting. Tuesday, January 19th. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the January 19th meeting?
So move.
Second.
And clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard,
Aye.
Alderwoman Hubbard, Alderman Muhammad, Alderwoman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard,
Aye.
Chairman Vaquero.
Aye.
5 aye votes.
Okay, what we're gonna do, we're gonna go ahead and I think what I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna put any particular time limit on Reverend Gray. What I think we'll do is I'm gonna let Reverend Gray, as the chairman of the task force, kind of go through all the recommendations. And I'll kind of go through what I was sent, but and then we'll hear from members of the task force. And in no particular order, I am not going to mute any of the members of the task force. So if at whatever point you can unmute yourself if you feel the need. Reverend Gray, like I said, no time limit. Just go ahead and go through what we've worked on and recommendations we have and where you think we should be going forward. I will say at the end of this, I am going to recommend that we keep the members of the task force that are willing on as a subcommittee of the Public Safety Committee. I would ask Vice Chairman Boyd or also possibly Alderwoman Clark Hubbard if they'd want to be a part of that subcommittee. So just kind of keep that in mind at the end of this. To keep this going, I think that the members of the task force would become part of a subcommittee. At what point I think then I would ask that we expand what they look into. And I would like them personally, and other people can chime in at the end of all this, to look into the workhouse. My feelings have never been and still aren't that we should close it, but I do think that we need to treat people properly, and I'd like to expand it so that we look into how people are being treated and that we get independent answers other than what I say or when I've been in there. So that's kind of the goal, my goal for at least the immediate goal. So Reverend Gray, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman Vaccaro, and good morning to all of the members of the Public Safety Committee and to the members of the task force that served to review the CJC and to Reverend Duval and John Chasnoff, who will be joining us today in this presentation. I first of all want to say to Chairman Vaccaro and to Alderman Jeffrey Boyd, thank you very much for the contribution that you made on the task force. It was extremely important that we had elected officials on the task force who understood the structure and the system as it is, as it relates to corrections in this city. I would like to say that that all of the members would agree that we were not able to do as much as we would have liked to do. But because we felt that it was urgent, because the mayor created the task force based upon the urgency, we felt that we had to move as quickly as possible. First of all, to address the immediate needs. We felt that the detainees had issued their concerns as it related to the conditions within the Justice Center, the services that they felt were not being provided, to include the lack of speedy trial. And we believe that we reviewed and investigated as much as we could. And we believe that the 68 recommendations that we presented represented short-term, mid-range, and long-term solutions or resolution to a lot of the problems that we identified within the correctional center. Just very quickly, and then we'll move forward with a format. The issues that we looked at, all the people, fell into three different categories. Number one, things that we could validate and recommend immediate solutions. Things that we could not validate because we could not get answers to our questions, or because there were different opinions expressed by detainees, staff, or administration, and things that required a longer term solution. We made it very clear in the beginning that because we did not have unrestricted access to detainees and to staff, that would cause an obstacle to what we were trying to do. We felt that the detainee representatives that we did talk to, who were wing representatives, were consistent in their message, in their concerns. And we felt that that testimony was usable to move forward, in addition to testimony from groups like Expo St. Louis and testimony from Congresswoman Cori Bush's office and others. And so we felt that we could at least comfortably submit the 68 recommendations to you. Before I go into the 13, obviously we're not going to try to resubmit 68 recommendations to you. We know that you have that information in front of you, and we know that you will review it and you'll do due diligence as a committee. But we will go over at least the 13 and focus on the one that I think that most of us are here to discuss today, which is the creation of an independent civilian oversight board for corrections. Finally, let me just say this: there were a lot of concerns that we reached, and the committee, Public Safety Committee, might have questions in reference to that. But we were extremely concerned, number one, with the second floor and how the second floor operated. We were concerned at the lack of speed in which people moved from their second floor, either out of the correctional facility or at least through the process. And that caused us some great concern. We were concerned with the lack of communication that we found between correctional office officials and city police and the sheriff's department. That concerned us. We were concerned about the fact that correctional officials knew about broken locks, but it took an uprising to deal with it. We're glad that the Board of E&A approved the $1.5 million, but it did concern us that this came after a protest, several protests. And our concern was, when did you know the locks were broken? Who was part of the chain of communication? And why didn't you do something about this sooner? Because we were concerned about the safety of both detainees and correctional staff with locks that you know are broken. The memorandum from the police, the Department of Police, concerned us because it showed the lack of communication between the police and corrections. From a health point of view, and I hope that Pam Walker is on to discuss that. We were concerned, obviously, about COVID and the impact on COVID within that building. We were concerned if detainees were being tested, but we were also concerned if correctional officers and staff were being tested. We understood that with the test itself, you couldn't make people test, but we were at least convinced that the requirement for testing was being adhered to, that the supplies were there and the ability to test was there. We were concerned about, obviously, people who needed to be vaccinated, being vaccinated, particularly those who fell within the certain tiers established by the state. And so we were pleased that at least while we were operating as a task force, there were detainees that received the vaccination. We're concerned about the number of staff who were tested and who received it. And once again, we were told you can't make people take the test. But within that closed environment, that was a concern that bothered us. And once again, there are other concerns that we'll mention or list when we talk about the what we call urgent or immediate recommendations. We felt again that we did what we were able to do with the time that was allotted to us and the access that was allotted to us. And again, I want to thank the members of the task force for the time that we put in. 13 different meetings, met with, and it's in the public, Congressman Cori Bush's office made presentation, the Circuit Attorney's office made presentation, public defenders made presentation, the Sheriff's office, the police department. Once again, we felt that we tried to get as much information as we could. And so here we are now. I believe that you have the 13 recommendations that we felt were more urgent. And I'll just speak to those recommendations very quickly. And then the last recommendation deals with the Corrections Task Force. There are two, the last 12 and 13. The St. Louis Board of Aldermen established an ordinance creating a corrections oversight board for its city correctional facilities and operations, and that attachment you have. And then 13, the Corrections Task Force be retained as a subcommittee of the Public Safety Committee until such time that a corrections oversight board is created. I think maybe we'll stick with that. We felt that if there had been some type of oversight entity that existed prior to December 29th, January 1st, January 2nd, and February the 6th, then that entity, if it were properly operating and executing its responsibility, may have mitigated the disturbances on those particular days, may have mitigated the vandalism, the destruction, but also the harm that was caused to not only correction officials, but also to an inmate as well. We felt that the absence of that was problematic, that all of the grievances, all of the concerns had to be registered internally. And I guess we were not convinced that without that external review and monitoring, that things would have moved as quickly, grievances would not have been addressed as quickly. And that was just our concern. One recommendation was to create this task force, as we have indicated, and in understanding that it may take some time in establishing an independent oversight committee, that in the interim, that a subcommittee of the Board of Aldermen may serve the purpose during that period, at least as a subcommittee with subpoena power and unrestricted access to detainees, to staff, to the building, that this may be helpful in utilizing a subcommittee to determine the terms of reference for a independent oversight committee. And so I think that for sake of time, that's probably where we need to be in our discussion, unless the Alder people have comments or questions as it relates to the other recommendations. But I think for time purposes, and because we believe that there is an urgency, we still believe that the atmosphere and the environment exist within the CJC, that we could see a repeat of what we saw on February 6th and the other days that we mentioned. And so if the other task force members don't have any objection, I think maybe we'll just stick on those two recommendations, the subcommittee and the oversight, independent oversight. And if there are no objections, and I'm looking and I don't see any, maybe the best way to start, I guess, would be members of the oversight committee who are on, who would speak to that recommendation, followed by Reverend Duval, who is on the advisory committee in the county. And the reason Reverend Duval has been asked to speak, because we want to look at the pros and cons of an advisory committee, or the advisory committee in the county, versus an independent oversight committee. So I do see Mr. Pruitt on from the task force, and if Mr. Pruitt would chime in. I know Alderman Boyd, Jeffrey Boyd was a member of that task force. If at least the two of you would make remarks as it relates to both of those recommendations, and then we'll ask Reverend Duval if he would make comments, and then John Chasnoff, who many of you know has been an ardent supporter of transparency and accountability within our justice system. And so we'll do it in that order, if the Chairman Vaccaro, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. No, I'm letting it up to you. And then at the end, the alderman on the committee,
Okay.
we'll let the alderman speak, but the alderman on the committee will put in the subcommittee.
Okay.
And the other thing we want to introduce that you didn't add was a board bill, which we're going to have to put in, that doesn't allow them to keep anyone in that holding cell for more than 40 hours. And those were on my list of probably real important things, the oversight, as well as
You're right.
not letting somebody stay in there. And that's going to require a board bill that they move them somewhere into the system or let them go. They have to do something. They just can't hold somebody for life in that holding cell.
Yes, sir. And you're right. And that recommendation is cease the practice of holding detainees in the holding cell more than 24 hours and implement policy to ensure transition to the appropriate police holding facility, corrections housing, transportation to other jurisdiction, or release is required after 24 hours, and that an appropriate tracking and accountability mechanism should be developed to monitor this moving forward. Thank you, Alderman. And so, Mr. Pruitt.
Great, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I did forward a written testimony as relates to the one recommendation of the Corrections Oversight, the proposed Corrections Oversight Board. If I may, I would at least highlight a couple of things in there. And one is that, of course, we have to have some sort of external oversight that will ensure that the city's adult detention facilities operate in accordance with the United States Constitution, that they work at limiting the population in an adult facility to the capacity that they're designed for. And more than anything else, that they operate safe and secure detention facilities that strive at least to meet or exceed the national standards and those constitutional requirements that are placed on municipalities as it relates to them holding detainees. I also mentioned that effective oversight will both allow for the public and the correctional administrators to know whether those goals are being met or not. And, and lastly, I think it's important that we continue to highlight the fact that the public remains skeptical about the current forms of oversight for the facility, and that a outside oversight board could offer a significant opportunity for dialogue and demonstrate a willingness to work in a cooperative manner. And at the same time, an oversight board would need to highlight not only the negative findings, but the positive findings that they identify within the city's correctional department. But more than anything, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, after we completed the ITAS and submitted recommendations, ironically, I got a bunch of letters, but two of them in particular that I think speak to the fact that some additional oversight is going to be needed. One I got from a former correctional officer in the CJC. He said that he retired early because of the conditions within the facility. He even mentioned that the locks that we're talking about, he said those locks had actually been inoperable for 2 to 5 years, not just recently. He said that's been going on for years, and that it got to a point where correctional officers felt unsafe going to the floor where they were manipulating the locks and will refuse to go. And then when they refused to go, they were written up and in some cases disciplined because they did not want to follow orders. He said that in just about all their briefings with their captains and lieutenants, they would consistently complain about the locks and were told to submit the complaint in writing. And he said they just continued to submit them and nothing would happen. So he said he just gave up and decided to retire early. And I just thought it was interesting that he went on to say that based on the issue of safety and the locks, he said that not only did he leave early, but he says he doubt very seriously whether the CJC is going to be able to staff up those positions that are needed, because a lot of folks are actually afraid for themselves as correctional officers to work in the facility because of issues like that. And then, Mr. Chairman, I also received one from a detainee, and it actually included a petition that was signed by, like 28 inmates, and all of these are inmates that are in 4C. And what was unique about what he stated was that one, he said he's had COVID twice since he's been in the facility. Not once, but he's tested twice for COVID. He says that as an example about the food service, he says that, when an inmate may come in and have certain preferences for a certain diet, some for their health and some for other reasons, and that when they submit through medical to get that diet, that they eventually get it, but it takes weeks. And he says, so they may go weeks eating something that's contrary to their health within the diet. He talked about a number of the stuff that we found through testimonies and things like that. But he, and I guess the thing that is somewhat even more disturbing, I think, is that he indicated that his attorney is aware of all of this, that they shared it with them, and the things continue to happen. And, I honestly believe that at some point in time, oversight also is going to include that somebody looks into the sort of representation or the degree of representation that these inmates are getting, because Mr. Chairman, I don't know why it would take 146 complaints or more to go to Art City Defenders for them to have to step in and try to address this matter, because it would seem to me there was 148 people that were represented by a lawyer, and it would appear to me that that lawyer should be filing something in the courts on their behalf to try to sort of get them the redress they need. And lastly, I want to say this, Mr. Chairman, if I may, because Chairman Vaccaro mentioned about the subcommittee and included in there this issue about the workhouse. We take a position that something needs to be done with the workhouse. I'm not far against the closure of it, but I will tell you this, Chairman Vaccaro and Vice Chairman Boyd and members of the committee, we get as many complaints. We get tons of complaints from individuals who are housed in facilities outside of the St. Louis region, in counties and all throughout rural Missouri, and the treatment that that African Americans, especially males, receive in some of those outstate facilities, and some of the things we get is horrible. It's horrible, and I just hope we never get to a point in the city of St. Louis where we're taking African American citizens of this city and shipping them out to places outside of this city where they can be subject to the things that we hear that are happening in outstate Missouri. If for any reason the city decides to go down that road, we're going to vigorously oppose it and fight, because I don't think a lot of folks understand that we have no stick and no ability to govern what happens in those outstate facilities. And believe me, Black people are not treated in a very kind way out there, and they have very little ability to seek help and assistance because of where those folks are located. So, Mr. Chairman, that's just my take on it. We support all the recommendations. We definitely support the priority recommendations, and we are 100% behind the need for external oversight to help make sure that all these recommendations are implemented in a way, and that detainees are at minimum afforded the constitutional rights that we all have.
Thank you, Mr. Pruitt. Reverend Duval, we're going to ask Reverend Duval if he would speak. And once again, the rationale is there were people during the conversation when establishment of an oversight board came up. Some asked the question, well, why don't you do what the county did? Why don't you develop an advisory committee? And so we'd ask Reverend Duval to speak to the pros and cons of advisory committee versus independent. And then we'll ask Mr. Chasnoff if he would then share with us. Reverend Duval?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Brother Chair, and to chairman and all elected officials on the board. Thank you for this opportunity to share. I think I want to start by understanding that St. Louis County had an advisory board per the charter. That charter language was written in 1979. So therefore, that language was antiquated and outdated, obviously, for 2019. Of course, the county was going through some very political struggles. At the time, the interim director, who had only been there as an interim for approximately a year and some months, we had a series of 3 deaths. 3 deaths occurred in less than 30 days. That's what ignited, where is the accountability in our justice services building? The 3 young men, there were two Caucasians, 1 African-American, that young man was 19 years old. He was just turning 20. There was obvious some concerns that were going on in the jail. The outgoing county executive, Steve Stinger, appointed at the time Lieutenant Colonel Troy Doyle from the St. Louis County Police Department to take over as the interim. So this just needs to be some clarity. We already had now 2 interim directors in less than 2 years. The place was in turmoil, and it was very hard to get a handle. It was looked upon as the advisory board had been dormant for about 3 or 4 years. So there had been no advisory board, no outside independent eyes. It was strictly running on its own. The then appointed and elected county executive, Sam Page, appointed the advisory board, and I was asked to serve as the chair. This would have been in July 2019. Some of the challenges that we met that I'm sure Reverend Gray, that your committee met, was coming in, getting access to lots of information. Everything I'm sure you lived through. And I applaud you and the committee for trying your best to get a handle, because there was a lot of information, a lot of complaining, a lot of grievances, and the distrust that seemed to be the culture in the jail of no one wanting to speak. Something also different between the county and the city is that the county has a medical, in-house medical, that are county employees. So we had a 2-headed monster, as I would call. You had the medical people complaining and blaming everything on correctional officers for failing to notify them in time, for failing for them to get their proper checks. Where you had the correctional officers yelling at the medical facility. We had called them, we had notified them. We basically had to now pull them back and look at the documentation that would support anybody's narrative. Thankfully, through the other advisory board members like Dr. Garza, Mary Taylor, they were able to get a hold of the medical information extremely fast and could bring it into some very structured protocols for medical. So whatever those protocols are, have to now be blended in with your correctional facility as one united, not 2 separate entities. Why? Because when you do have situations and circumstances, you're going to want to be able to prove and see the documentation that supports the reporting in. Medical did outstanding. They began to do the portals. They began to report out the information. And a layman's view, and you cannot have to have a degree to figure out what the numbers we're trying to breed out. So we're grateful in that sense that medically we were able to solidify that. My deepest concern is the safety of the inmates, but as well as the staff. There appears to be, you can only talk to white shirts only, because the white shirts are the ones that are going to give you all the answers that we want to hear. You've got to get to the root base of correctional officers. And they have to range from being there only 6 months to a year, going up, you go 5 years, you find out at the root of it, what are their needs? What are they observing? Because you want to retain them. You want them to be able to stay there long enough to bring about systematic change within that jail. If not, you working everything on the top end and you're only talking to the white shirts and you're only talking to management, it is imperative to go all the way to the root to then start changing the culture in the jail. The inmates will benefit. The inmates will understand that if you have a person who knows how to engage in talking to them, giving them instructions, there's less restraints, there are less fights, there are less issues, providing that you have correctional officers that know how to engage with the inmates. And even if the other one doesn't, you have alternatives, because they have to learn as a group, from a sergeant back to the correctional officer, because they're the ones that make the change every day and keep that jail safe. Report writing. I want to reference something I heard Dr. Pruitt say about the correctional officer that left early. If in fact that those locks have been inoperative, this gives us a perfect example as to why the culture doesn't change. People were putting themselves in danger every day for 3 to 4 to 5 years. That documentation would support what oversight does anyone have to look at how many times at a watch commander's call, at a meeting, that those things were captured. Their voices have to be seen, which gets into the transparency and accountability. The St. Louis County Advisory Board, we're very limited. We have to fight for certain things that should be transparent, not just to us, but to the general public. I know policies are now being put out there. You need to check the dates of these policies, when the policies were last reviewed, and more importantly, who reviewed the policies. It cannot just be the same people who review the policies. It needs to be independent eyes. It needs to be somebody else. You have someone on staff, I won't mention his name, but you have a subject matter expert that sits and works for the St. Louis City. And he was, we should have went on and hired him as our director. But he sits there with a vast amount of years of experience that knows other jail administrators across this country. And those who have been doing this for a long time have maintained friendships, and it is vital. And Dr. Gray, I'll be in touch with you to give you some of those names to other people that we've met outside of the St. Louis area that could provide you some specificity on some of the things I'm trying to just say in a general sense about how certain things work in jail operations, and here's why, and are they consistent with your policies? So back to Pruitt's statement about this correctional officer. What is disturbing is you had somebody with some years of experience that left because the place was unsafe. What does that say to the younger officers? It is vital to keep and retain as much as you can with what you have. And even with what you have, you can train them and provide them resources. So I'm making my appeal now for the correctional officer. Training. Training is vital to go back and look at the training policies. And more importantly, who's doing the training? Are they repeating the same training that they got many years ago? Or are they actually getting refreshed training that works on an industry standard? We have found in the county that our training, in my opinion, is horrific. It's not satisfactory. The training, you've got to put an investment in a resource for training. Otherwise, you're going to continue to get the same results. I think lastly, what I want to talk about, I don't like using this term ombudsman, but to help reduce, as I've heard Pruitt again, talk about the many complaints and grievances and going to the attorney. We don't have an ombudsman. We have this person that we call him the community service liaison. And that community service liaison is supposed to receive all the complaints internally from inmates, as well as any external complaints when they're trying to do wellness checks. And it's that person's sole responsibility to make the connections within a timely manner to get whatever concerns or grievances that need to be channeled out. And then we have a tracking device that determines, hey, inmate B had a problem 2 months ago, what happened? It shouldn't have been 2 months, but then there's somebody who sits there and says, well, look, here are the calls we made, here's the responses we received, and here's how it stands at this status. So again, we're not calling it officially an ombudsman, but a service liaison person that makes those connections to reduce the amount of grievances. Now, we continue to struggle. We continue to have challenges, and there's a lot more work for us to do in St. Louis County, but anything we can say or help or give you any advice, I would close by saying I'm a strong proponent of it being independent. You said a buzzword, and Gray, you and I have been knowing each other a long time. I know people get scared with the word subpoena power. People get scared when we say investigatory power. If they don't have investigatory power and they don't have subpoena power, they're going to have a fight constantly to get to the facts, to bring out the truth that helps fixes the issue. So I just make that passionate plea. If you're just going to say it's an oversight board and you're just going to put all those bells and whistles around it, if it doesn't have any teeth, it doesn't have any strong structure, if the language isn't put in there early, it's unfortunate. We'll be repeating this after we're dead and gone, and the people behind us will be having these same conversations in years to come. Thank you for your time. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much, Reverend Duval. And to the members of the excuse me, Public Safety Committee, as we said, the conversation came up, advisory committee versus independent oversight. Now we'll ask John Chasnoff. Many of you know him. You know the work that John puts into accountability and transparency, particularly as it relates to criminal justice reform. So, John, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to thank the Public Safety Committee for listening to my remarks today. And I wanted also to thank the task force for inviting me to speak. That, you know, they didn't have to ask me to be here today, but I appreciate that they wanted to broaden out the conversation, you know, to get some thoughts that were outside the task force. And so I'm much appreciative of being here today. First, I wanted to say that I've had a long interest in, have advocated for quite some time for oversight of the city jails. In 2009, when I joined the ACLU, I was involved in doing substantial edits on the report that came out that year from the ACLU, Suffering in Silence, which was about conditions in the jails and problems we were having back then in 2009. And then I wrote a follow-up to that report a couple years later called Still Suffering in Silence. In between, we had extensive negotiations with the executive branch around trying to create oversight for the city jails. And unfortunately, they walked away from those conversations before we could get anything established. So my advocacy on this issue goes back a number of years. And I am very appreciative that the task force has put the emphasis that they have on jail oversight as being, you know, their most important recommendation and something that is really sorely needed. I very much appreciate their emphasis on this issue. So what I wanted to do is share some thoughts about how this body, the Public Safety Committee, might start to think about how to implement some of these recommendations. And emphasize some of the things in the draft ordinance that I think are, you know, crucial, and some other amendments and that I would make to the bill, you know, moving forward as we broaden this out into a larger community discussion. So first, and I want to say too that I have been in consultation here with the Coalition Against Police Crimes and Repression, and I'm representing their views here today as well. So first of all, I very much appreciate that the task force included in their recommendation, in their ordinance, that this independent body would draw on various categories of expertise. They had, you know, somebody from law enforcement, somebody from the medical community, somebody from the civil rights community. And I do think it's very crucial that the Oversight Board has that kind of broad representation. And very much appreciated seeing that, you know, built into the ordinance. I appreciated that the Oversight Board would report directly to the mayor. We've seen with the Civilian Oversight Board, which is in the Department of Public Safety, that has worked fairly well. But the Civilian Oversight Board has not always had in the Public Safety Director the strong advocate that they might use, you know, that they needed in order to get information. Reverend Duval talked about the difficulties of getting information, and the COB is seeing that when the Public Safety Director also represents or oversees the police department, and his interests are pulled in different directions, that they haven't always had the strong advocate they need, and hopefully the mayor would be that advocate to reinforce their need to get the information that's necessary. And I appreciate the emphasis in the ordinance on looking at policies and practices, because I do think that part of oversight's responsibility is to change the overall culture, and you do that by looking at broad practices, a changing policy. It's not always about individual officers and particular misconduct, though those are problems. But the ability to look at policies and practices, I think, is really crucial, and I much appreciated that in the draft ordinance. Where would I, as somebody who is not in on their deliberations, where would I maybe make some changes to the recommendations that they put forth? I'm not positive that we need to create a new separate entity and create a separate bureaucracy here within city government. When I think we have established civilian oversight and the Civilian Oversight Board for Police is functioning well. This committee and others might want to look at expanding the powers of the Civilian Oversight Board and making some changes to that ordinance so that oversight of the jails could be included. That might streamline the process. I think it would be crucial to keep the different levels of expertise that I mentioned earlier in some capacity within the Civilian Oversight Board, but I'm wondering if we might look at that structure as a more streamlined way to do this. Of course, doing that would require expanded staff because the COB doesn't have the capacity now to do those types of investigations. And that was, I think, one of the limitations of the draft ordinance was it called for an administrator to be appointed who would be overseeing and working with this board, but I don't think it provided the staff that's necessary. The ordinance calls for support from the mayor's office and from the public safety director, but I think it needs to be built into the ordinance exactly what the staffing needs would be in order to meet the capacity of responsibilities. And one of the reasons why I think that doing it through the Civilian Oversight Board might be a good idea is the question that Reverend Gray raised about the second floor and the processing of inmates into the facility. There is a period there when there is police responsibility and corrections officers' responsibility, and that's sometimes a little gray, and there may well be incidents that fall kind of on both sides of that line where you have maybe a police misconduct inside the jail, but then the person is taken to the corrections medical facility and maybe has some issues there. It would be more seamless to have one body who can bridge that gap and work, on both the policing side of that issue and the correction side of that issue as it happens inside that building. I think one of the other changes that I would make, as much as I appreciated the emphasis on policy and practices recommendations, my experience has been that those recommendations are best informed when folks are looking at individual complaints. And the pattern of complaints that emerges is really what can inform the need for changes in policies and practices. And so the draft ordinance said that the oversight board would be able to look at complaints, but my reading of it is that it would only be complaints that are related to critical incidents. That's my phrase, but the incidents that the board would have jurisdiction over were, serious physical injury and other more serious incidents that I would call, critical incidents, but didn't look at the broad range of issues that might come up and the broad range of complaints that I think needs oversight as well. And one of the reasons that besides this idea, the necessity of informing your policy recommendations based on those complaints, I think if we look a little deeper, you all will see that the complaint process at the jails now is currently not working. I mentioned that we were involved in negotiations back in 2010, 2011 with the city. One of the things that we got established through that was lock boxes so that corrections officers didn't have to hand their complaints directly to a corrections officer who might be the person who, violated their rights in the first place. We were hearing that those sometimes would just get put in the trash. And so we were able to get established lock boxes so that detainees could put their complaints into a locked box where it would be more protected, more likely to get passed on. But what I'm hearing as of just a few days ago is that there's a lock box there that has not been emptied for 6 months, that it's overflowing with complaints, that the lock was broken, but when the jails got a locksmith in to work on something else, he didn't fix the lock on that lock box. And so complaints have just been sitting there. I can't tell you how discouraging it is to think that maybe you made some progress years ago and made things better, and to hear that the system that you helped establish still isn't working. And so for that reason, I think it would be really important that the independent oversight look at individual complaints as well. Now, the last point I want to make about the whole issue of taking complaints is that that is a system that can't work as long as inmates are feeling intimidated about participating in filing or willing to file a complaint, and that they are free from repercussions. And so I did appreciate that the draft ordinance builds in protections and says that there can't be any retaliation. But I think just the fact of an inmate going into a room, a closed room, to discuss with the oversight board a complaint that he or she might have, that opens them up to potential retaliation from corrections officers who see that happening, and retaliation can sometimes be very hard to prove. So I think that the ordinance needs to look a little more closely at protocols for how those complaints and interviews happen. It might be that we need the sheriff's office to take people out of the building in some other secure location for an interview, so that everyone inside doesn't know why they're leaving the building. But I do think those types of protections would be crucial. So those are just some of my thoughts. Again, I'm appreciative that this conversation has begun. I hope to participate in the future, but I'm very appreciative of being able to speak with you all today and begin this conversation.
Thank you very much, John. I know that the task force members were very clear that we wanted to be as inclusive as possible, to try to get information from as many sources as possible. Once again, time did not allow us to do all that we wanted to do, but we're appreciative to Alderman Vaccaro and Alderman Boyd, who sat on the committee, because from the moment we began to talk about recommendations, Alderman Boyd and Alderman Vaccaro were very supportive of the what's next. And that was important to all of us. And so the 13 recommendations, the urgent and priority recommendations, became kind of the centerpiece of where do we go from here, or how do we get there from here? As John has said, the ordinance language that we presented, once again, based upon our limited understanding, as much as we knew, tried to do as much research as we could in a short amount of time. But when Alderman Vaccaro indicated that this opportunity would present itself for the task force members to make presentation, as the former chair of the task force, I just felt that because we didn't have all of the information and couldn't do all the research, it made sense to bring in someone like a Reverend Duval, who is involved in the county, and a John Chasnoff, who has been involved for years, so that we could add to that recommendation, specifically as it related to the oversight committee. So John and Reverend Duval, thank you very much. Once again, my grandmother would always say, a second eye, somebody who looks at it again. Sometimes you look at your own work and you just see your own work. But when other people look at it, they're able to kind of bring it out. And so what I'll do at this moment, Chairman Vaccaro, if there are older people who may have questions of myself, Mr. Pruitt, Reverend Duval, and John as it relates to our specific presentation. Maybe we can take those questions and then we'll just wrap it up at the end and just turn it back over to you
So, yeah,
for
normally
whatever disposition. Yeah.
what we'll do is generally we'll go down the list, in order of seniority. I did want to go just so that, because I wrote some comments down.
Yes, sir.
So one of the things that I agree with Adolfo Pruitt is we do not want, and we had said that in committee, people being sent all over the state just because they're being ordered held by the court. We can't just unhold people. That's the courts. And our concern in the Public Safety Committee has always been for the welfare of the people that are being held, not the building they're held in. I strongly believe that you empower your employees. The guys that were driving the cars knew more about the job than I did. I would buy a cheaper chemical and they would say, Joe, it's taking us twice as long. The employees are the ones that know the business, not, I just made notes, the lots were fixed. I think that and I'm the one that recommended that we do an oversight committee because I felt otherwise we just spent a lot of time wasted. I think one of the members of the oversight committee need to be able to sit on CJCC. Some of the stuff I agreed with and disagree with in how it's written. I don't think we should combine this with any other one. I think it should be a strong, oversight committee. I think it should follow what we did. There were 7 people picked from the city that were recommended to the mayor picked, and then we interviewed. I don't agree that they should report back only to the mayor. The mayor can't even make this board bill, no matter who the mayor is. They should always come back to the Public Safety Committee, because if the Oversight Board sees an issue, they tell the mayor, nothing can be done. But if by ordinance, this is going to be a work in project, a work in process that could be taking place for the next 20 years. Things change, they come back. There might be, things that I've always wanted to see was I'd like to see one of the floors be dedicated only to mental health issues. I think there needs to be a speedier, on how we deal with medical issues. And again, I think about myself that, a day without my medicine would not be a good thing. And I'm aware, I was very aware of the people that died in our facilities and so, I never, and still don't, it's not that I'm opposed to closing the workhouse, but again, I agree with Adolfo Pruitt that unless we can do something in a way that makes sense, that's important. I want to include I want to put together, because I've asked the closed workhouse people to go in the workhouse and talk to the people in the workhouse. And I think what you're going to find is nobody wants to be confined, but they absolutely will tell you, please don't send us over to the Justice Center and don't send us anywhere else. They have at least freedom there to go in and out. There's an outside area. There's a big gym. That's why I really want the oversight committee to go talk to them. Yeah, is there a need to I don't know. But I do know that what I care about and always have cared about, and our committee as a whole has cared about, and the reason we have never voted other than to look into closing the workhouse. We care about the people in the workhouse. We care about the people in the Justice Center. And the sad part is we've concentrated most of our effort on looking at the workhouse. And after sitting on the oversight, on the task force, I will admit, I should have been looking in the other direction too. Because people that were held for roughly, or at least a person, but people are being held more than a day or two in a holding cell with one bathroom, no showers, no medical needs. That's appalling. I don't care, you can close the building down, don't close the building down. I can care 2 cents about any of that. What I do care about is how the people are treated. Lock yourself, get locked in a cell with a group of people with one place to take a shit. You know, that's not right. And the power struggle, you know, when you hear from the guy on the county, the power struggle, we got that. Well, it's the sheriff's problem. Well, no, that's not us. That's the marshals. No, it's not us. That's Dale Glass. That's the jail. The one thing I do know that we can do, the Public Safety Committee can write ordinances regulating the jail. It's our jail. We're responsible for that building and how people are treated in it. That we can do. So I did look through what you had sent. What I would say is, and I looked, in fact, I asked Mary to help me a little bit, but at the ordinance that established it's a 7 board, was nominated by the mayor and then confirmed by the Board of Aldermen. The qualifications, you had to be 18 years old. Everyone was picked from an area of the city. But, you know, that, I think, as we sit together with Reverend Gray and Mr. Pruitt and all of us, I think we need to do a little roundtable on how we put together the ordinance. In the meantime, and I believe that in the ordinance, I would have no issue supporting subpoena power for that particular group of 7. In the meantime, I would ask the members of the Board of Aldermen, and as we go down the list, you can tell me how you feel about this. I would like to make a subcommittee, which would give them subpoena power. It would be under us. And I do believe that the committee should always be reporting back to the Public Safety Committee, no matter who chairs it, because they're the ones that are going to say, you know, we need another rule that needs to be put in place, an ordinance regulating something. If you tell the mayor, I guess maybe they can do an executive order, or maybe not. Maybe the next mayor changes the executive order. But I do think that we can establish policies. And again, I would have never have thought to make the policy until we sat on that oversight. And while everybody has us looking over here at the workhouse, which when you go in, I think you're going to see compared to the Justice Center, there's a massive difference. Well, I'm looking over here, the building's burning over there. And I'm glad.
Alderman, I'm sorry, Brother Chair, Mr. Chair, can I just interject for a minute? And I guess I want to make it clear. I mean, our task, was simply CJC.
No.
And I just want, just for the record, and we were very cautious of the fact, or conscious of the fact of the workhouse and conversations about that. And in this particular recommendation, we understood that as long as any correctional facility that is operated by the city existed, that the oversight committee would be responsible for oversight of any and all correctional facilities. And so we were very clear about that, but we were also clear not to, mix the two, based upon conversations and agreements and board actions that have already taken place as it relates to the workhouse. So we were very clear. And then just second to that, the reason that I think we stated in our recommendations that the board's review should assist the mayor's office to include the president of the Board of Aldermen and Public Safety Committee, because as you said, we understand at the end of the day, the Public Safety Committee is in a position really to make things happen more quickly as it relates to policy, as it relates to procedure. And so we were very clear about that. And so we were trying to look at, Alderman Vaccaro, the quickest way to get to that destination, the quickest way to get to oversight. And that's what we looked at. And I don't think that any members of the task force are adverse to, at the end of the day, who does the committee report to? Nor are we adverse to what Mr. Chasnoff said about morphing it into to COB. We just think that we want there to be an entity that would be responsible for moving these 68 recommendations forward, as Dr. Pruitt said. Who does that? Is it a subcommittee of public safety that would be responsible for moving that through to include the creation of an independent oversight board? Would that subcommittee be responsible for doing that? And then once it is done, does the subcommittee cease to exist? And then the oversight committee then take on that responsibility. And the subcommittee can determine whether or not this falls under the mayor's office, whether or not it falls under public safety. But if we're saying that this is urgent, we're glad that at least you and Alderman Boyd have said, because you recognize the urgency, let's do the subcommittee. And then the subcommittee will then move forward with getting everything else done. I guess that's where our head was at, because the problem still exists. And so I think that as members of the task force, we're open to whatever the Public Safety Committee deems would be most expedient and effective with the time, with the resources that we have. I think, Dr. Pruitt, I think that's where we were as a task force. What's next and who does it? What entity gets us to that destination? I just wanted to insert that.
No, and I agree. And that's why I want to do the subcommittee, because one of the things that I want to move forward with at the beginning of the new session, which is just a few weeks away, the rule on how long someone can stay in there. But the subcommittee will, ultimately the aldermen have to make the ordinances. The subcommittee would come back and we would honor the subcommittee's recommendations. So rather than, because it'll take, 4 or 5 months or 3 months or whatever. I'd like to have this done before we would go, after we get in session, before we go on summer break, to have an oversight board put in place. I'd like to see that oversight board have subpoena power. I would like, right now under the subcommittee, we would have that because we do. My main goal has always been about the people, not the building.
Yes, sir.
And I think that, and really that's what I hope that we focus on. So I'm going to go down to the members of the board. I had asked at the beginning too, as we put the subcommittee together, which would be the members of the oversight of the task force. I would ask that I go down the board, get comments, and see if there's a problem, because we have to. I don't know if we have to agree, but I'd like to get an agreement amongst the committee and some sort of ideas as to the subcommittee, what we'd like them or what we feel they should look into, which I believe we do need to look into the conditions of the workhouse. And I'm sure there's recommendations there too, but I really also would like to have that because I think it could dispel some of the things that people say about it. I would like to know, and if there's truly stuff that maybe I'm just not seeing when I'm in there, I don't know. Nobody wants to be in jail, and that would include me. And nobody's going to find anything pleasant about being in jail. But people get there, it's not full of all innocent people. But anyway, let me move down the list because I'm a chatterbox and I know it.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if it's appropriate, but I had a little tidbit of information that might inform the discussion, if I could insert that.
Sure.
now.
Go
Thank
ahead.
you. Appreciate it. When we were looking to create the Civilian Oversight Board, one of the issues that we looked at was the intricacies of the Sunshine Law, and who can look at confidential information like personnel records that might be involved in complaints. And so the reason we decided to put it in the executive branch is that members of the executive branch are able to look at closed records, where members of the, if a board is placed in the legislative branch, there might be some wrinkles involved in whether or not members of the oversight board could look at closed records. And, I'm not a lawyer. There may well be ways that your authority as a legislative body provides an umbrella for that oversight board. But it may be that you run into a problem where you could see records, but the members of the oversight board couldn't. So I just wanted to raise that as something to look into as you all sort this out.
I agree. I don't know that I disagree, but we can look into that. But I think the purpose, I don't know that there's really any closed records they'd have to look at. I think the idea is the treatment of the people in there as there are guests, how they're treated, that they're not stuck in one room, that they're not, treated poorly. I mean, I think that's at least my, I'm going to run down the list, but thank you. Vice Chairman Boyd, and I'm not restricting anybody to time. I'm just listening now. I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say again, thank you to all the task force members who put in a lot of good work in a short period of time. I kind of looked at all the work as kind of an icebreaker, to work on the real solutions, because certainly, doing the real work is going to require more than 6 weeks to get something done. I think it's important that we all be clear that there are a lot of stakeholders involved in this ecosystem of people being incarcerated. And we need to ensure that as a public safety committee that we're working with all those stakeholders. More importantly, the Community Justice Coordinating Council, because they've been doing a lot of good work and they've been looking at a lot of good data sets. And so I'm looking forward to the follow-up, introducing legislation if that's what's necessary, looking to just make that system a better system. I am committed to it. I'm excited about the opportunity to potentially be on public safety. Nothing is guaranteed. We come back to a new session. Chances are with Alderman Vaccaro's seniority that he would probably be the chairman of public safety, and I certainly will request to be on that committee. But it was very illuminating on what happens in the Justice Center. Some of it was facts, some of it was embellished. And our job is to make sure that we know all the real facts. And I went into it with an open mind, not judging anybody and not judging the process. As a matter of fact, I think I was pretty humble through the whole experience. I just did a lot of listening, and it was a very good educational experience for me. But the real work is going to begin after the new session begins with a new mayor. That is where the real work will begin. And hopefully whoever the next mayor is will continue to embrace community input. I don't agree with John Chasnoff a lot, but he offers a lot of good information for us to look at. And I don't say that in a disparaging way at all. I mean, we just don't always agree, and that's okay. And there have been times where I've changed my position on something because I kept listening and I kept hearing it and I kept wanting to have more information and looking into it. And because I'll tell you, as an alderman, I've been through some trickery with people that I've been trying to help. People who have issues with the police, people who've had issues with City Hall, period. And when I got down to the nitty gritty, I found out I didn't have all the facts, and I ended up with egg on my face. So I always approach serious situations like this with a lot of caution, and I want to be thorough and make sure that it's a fair process and that we're treating our constituents with dignity at the end of the day. So I'm kind of actually pumped about coming back and helping do some of the real work. And again, I just want to thank everybody on the task force for a great job. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let me go down the list here. Alderwoman Carol Howard.
Yes, I'm impressed with the work that's been done thus far. And I'm pleased to know that you did engage with those that are charged with the care of people that are incarcerated. I really, I know some people personally, they don't do this because they have a sense of inhumanity to them. They do it because I think they feel a need, and they're called to service. And I think they really have a pulse on what goes on in the prison if you dig deep enough. Many of them know what's going on. They have a good sense and grounded in right and wrong. And I think one of the things that, the Board of Aldermen, by issuing this past close the workhouse, caused a lot of the workers to flee and look for other employment that mitigated a lot of the issues that were going on at the time. I'm not saying everything has been, I guess, for lack of a peaches and cream, but I think that this is a start in the right direction to look at how we house the people that are accused of crimes. I won't call them offenders because we don't know. They are innocent until proven guilty. And I think that looking at the court system and reviewing your reports, I think those also allow us, we need to look in the court system and see how people are being treated all the way through the justice system. We know statewide, we do not have enough public defenders. We're not paying them enough. I think this may be a catalyst to reform the whole justice system, not just one segment of the population. And I'm glad that you recognize that taking the prisoners out of their environment into, the hinterlands of Missouri provides an additional burden to the families that may provide support for people that, are offenders, are accused. And I would be more than willing to give some time to the task force if called to do so. So I admire the work you've done so far, but I don't think we ought to add this to the Police Oversight Board. I think this should be a separate standalone. I think that, they have enough to do, and I think you're kind of mixing apples and oranges there. But I admire the work you've done so far. I appreciate what's been said so far, and like I said, if you need help, I'm willing to contribute time to it. Thank you very much for your help, and hopefully moving forward, we can make the world better for those people that are accused of crimes and provide some rehabilitation and get them back on track. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your comments. I agree. If we have one group focusing only on the jails and the people, if we could focus them, why don't we make them the police, and then let's do the prosecute. It gets too intermingled. This is one focus, and I agree 100%. Alderwoman Tamika Hubbard. I know she was there. She might have stepped out. Alderwoman Hubbard, are you still with us? She might have stepped out. And then I saw Alderman Muhammad there for a minute. I don't know if he's still with us or not.
I'm here, Mr. Chairman.
Any comments or thoughts on what's gone on so far?
Yes, just a couple of questions for clarification, Mr. Chairman. If I may, a few residents in my ward are watching this via YouTube, and they asked me a couple of questions, and I want to make sure that I relay the appropriate and correct information back to them. So I don't know who I'm addressing, whether it is Mr. Gray or Mr. Chasnoff, but I guess they will decide that once I ask the question. Mr. Chairman, my first question is, with the recommendation, is this the only recommendation that the task force came up with, or is it just the only recommendation that this committee was presented with because it was the most effective as they see so? That's my first question. My second question is in regards to the oversight board hiring an executive director. It does not exactly list the compensation or the financial affairs that it would take to create this committee. So I would like to know, what does that look like? And has there been any coordination directly with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council? Because I know we have an executive director of that board that does pretty much a lot of the duties that were listed in the recommendation. Those would be my three questions first, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Alderman Vaccaro, I can answer. I think I can answer all three.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you guys do that.
Okay. To the first question, we felt, Alderman Collins Muhammad, that the Corrections Oversight Board, as we recommended, would be the best entity to provide the kind of oversight, monitoring, follow-up that we felt was needed. We looked throughout the country. We looked at different models throughout the country as related to oversight boards. We try to narrow it down to oversight boards that fit the kind of complexion, composition, demographics that St. Louis had, population, etc. And so this particular model came out of New Jersey, Essex County, New Jersey. As I said, we looked at several. We looked at probably over a dozen different models. This one seemed to fit, and we felt that this particular model would best serve the St. Louis government structure. So that was number one. We felt that the way in which this ordinance has been written up, with the purpose, intent, and so forth, would best serve St. Louis. As far as the compensation for the executive director, our submission was basically broad and general. We did not get into the specifics of that because we felt that would best take place within the confines of the Public Safety Committee and or the mayor's office, or whatever branch would take this on and provide ownership, because that particular branch would have been able to look at as far as an executive director in this particular market. What would executive director make in this particular market? What have you paid executive directors doing this kind of work? So, we felt that whoever handled the next step would be in a better position to determine what a budget would look like, as Mr. Chasnoff indicated, he was right, what a staff component would look like, that the next group would be able to do that. We didn't have the kind of time, nor do I think we had the kind of resources available internally as volunteers to do due diligence to that. And then finally, we did reach out to the CJCC. We did receive some input from them as related to the task force, and that communication is reflected within our report as an attachment. Some of us did express, Alderman Collins Muhammad, a little bit of concern that we didn't know a whole lot about CJCC. We didn't know what they were doing. We didn't feel that the community at large knew what it was doing. And so that concerned us, that if we don't know what they're doing, if that information is not being circulated and communicated to the public, then that was problematic in and of itself. And that, we did agree, as you have indicated, that either the oversight members, someone from the oversight board could and or should be part of CJCC, or the opposite, that someone from CJCC be part of that. So we did agree that there needed to be some coming together of both entities. And so I hope, Alderman Collins Muhammad, that satisfies your question.
Well,
Mr. Pruitt?
Well, I was going to say the other thing just quickly, John, there's Alderman Mahart, there's 63 recommendations. This is just one we're focusing on today.
I think Mr. Pruitt wanted to bring some clarity as well.
Yeah, one other quick thing about the CJCC. We found it maybe a little ironic that it was unaware of, or appeared to be unaware of the things that we found as the task force, and remembering that the members of the correctional department and some of the other folks sit on the CJCC, but at the same time, it was not aware of to any major degree that I was able to ascertain from anything we got from them of this type of things that we found were going on in the facility. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, real quickly, when we talk about this merging of these two entities, there's a number of reasons why I'm opposed to that, but one big one is that I would not want the police oversight board to be investigating a police officer and at the same time looking into the conditions of a detainee who has filed a complaint against the police. So I think there'll be some inherent conflicts all along with potentially one board looking at the complaint from both entities, and they may be against each other. And there's some other reasons why, but that's one of the big ones. I would not want to see anybody investigating a police officer for mistreating of a detainee, and at the same time have an oversight of how the detainee is being treated in the facility.
Mr. Alderman Muhammad, I hope that satisfies your concerns.
It does. Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Gray, and thank you, President Pruitt. I don't have any concerns. It was just questions that I just wanted to bring further transparency and clarifications to. And real quick, you mentioned other jurisdictions that have adopted an oversight board for correctional facilities. I'm just curious. I know you mentioned New Jersey. Are there any jurisdictions or counties in the state of Missouri that operates a independent board that oversees their correctional institutions?
I think that Kansas City has an oversight board. I think that was adopted a couple of years ago. It may have been last year, John, or a couple of years ago, but I'm sure that Kansas City, we did look at that. And there were some issues there because even though it said oversight, it seemed to be more of an advisory board than an oversight board. But Kansas City, Missouri does have one as well.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Reverend Gray. No further questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Muhammad. Just drop down here. Alderwoman Pam Boyd, I know she was here.
I have no questions. They all been asked and answered. Thank you.
Okay, I thought you said you had to step aside. Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard.
I don't have any specific questions. Yeah, I am excited and encouraged about this work, along with the work that CJCC is doing and the work that we can all do together. Something that Reverend Duval said that resonated with me, it was about making sure that we take care of the different tiers of people that are closest to these problems we know, or the people that are going to know the most about the problems. So clearly I'm learning about this process, but like all of us have stated, we want what's best. So I will absolutely be in support of this committee, of this oversight board moving forward, but making sure that, again, like Reverend Duvall and Dr. Pruitt said, it has the teeth, and Reverend Gray said it has the teeth that it needs, because otherwise we'll just be sitting in more meetings with more data, with more programs that don't implement or change any policies that can make sure that the work is being done. So thank you again for all the work that you all have done thus far, and I will definitely be supporting your work moving forward.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
So my question to Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard.
Mhm.
So excuse me. So today I'm going to put together a subcommittee that I want them to start now so that when we go into our new session, we hit the board running, we hit the floor running that. So I want to expand what they're doing now and let them start going now, because we have several weeks that they can actually come up with what we're going to do. We already know we're going to do a board bill to put together an oversight, and how we do that, what's included. One of the board bills that I'm going to put together and have ready to go even before we get going is how long someone is allowed to stay in a holding cell. But would you want to be on? I would ask either you or Vice Chairman Boyd, just as a start. Would you want to serve on that subcommittee? And it's going to be time consuming a little bit. I mean, the people on the task force have dedicated like a full-time job. I don't know how they did anything else other than this. It was day in, day out. It was weekends. I'm just asking, do you want to serve on that subcommittee? Because I'm gonna put it together.
Alderman Vaccaro, you know I'm always gonna say yes. I'm always here to serve, and I want to make sure that I could be in place to do whatever I can to support that. But there were some other colleagues of our colleagues on the call. I didn't know if they wanted to speak, and I did get a question about if this can be done right now today during this committee. So, and I didn't know, because I'm still learning. So, can we make sure that we offer it up? I mean, see if they had any comments for the report, and then move forward.
Well, yeah, we're certainly going to open it up to them, but right now, can I put a subcommittee together? Absolutely. Can it be done at this? Yes. Does it require the full board of aldermen? No. Anytime the chairman, and I've already talked to the vice chairman, and anytime that we want to put a subcommittee together, and that's any committee, it's up to the chair of the committee to put a subcommittee together.
Okay. Well, that being said, please add my name to the subcommittee. Thank you.
Okay, that means, and I was going to ask Vice Chairman Boyd, is that something you're willing to serve on right now, or it's time consuming?
Okay.
So, okay, then here's what I'm going to do. Before we move on, to opening it up to everybody, which we will, I'm going to go ahead and just go down the roll here. What I would say is I would ask the members of the task force that are willing to serve on a subcommittee to let me know now, so I can go ahead and put the subcommittee together. So Pam Walker, I don't know if she's here or not.
She's not, but she did indicate to me, Alderman Vaccaro, that if the subcommittee was created, that she would be more than honored to continue serving.
Okay, and Adolfo Pruitt?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, Reverend Gray, I would hope so.
Yes, I would. I would.
Let's see. Reverend Duvall? Is he
Reverend Duvall? No, he's a county.
Oh, no, that's right. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Reverend Norris is on the line.
Yeah, Reverend Norris, you gonna hang out with us for a while?
Yes, Mr. President, I'd be willing to continue to serve. Yes.
And I won't be on the subcommittee because I know you report back to Reverend Gray. So here's what the subcommittee is going to look like. And if any other of the aldermen in public safety want to be on it, they can jump in. Right now, the subcommittee would, and we'll go down a vote here in a minute, would consist of Vice Chairman Jeffrey Boyd, Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard, Dr. Well, they say doctor, she says she's not, but Pam Walker, Adolfo Pruitt, Reverend Daryl Gray, and Reverend Norris. Am I missing anyone off that group that had prior served on the task force?
Senator
Oh, yeah, Senator
Jamila
Nasheed.
Nasheed. I have not had an opportunity to speak to her, but I might get in trouble, Dr. Pruitt, but I would say that she was willing to serve. Her insight was invaluable, and the other person was Tracy Stanton. Those were the other two people. I can't speak on their behalf, but I'm going to try as the former chair that if the two of them, at least if we can say yes to them, and we will confirm it. But I think that they both offered invaluable insight to the committee, Alderman Vaccaro. So I would say if you're keeping the task force together, I would recommend that those two names also be included.
So it's Tracy
Stanton, Stanton.
Okay, and
Senator Jamila Nasheed.
okay, so the subcommittee, this is just for the committee to kind of agree or disagree. Would be Pam Walker, Adolfo Pruitt, Reverend Daryl Gray, Reverend Norris, Tracy Stanton, Senator Nasheed, Vice Chairman Jeffrey Boyd, and Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard. That would be the subcommittee. And I would ask that subcommittee start as soon as possible. And at that point, you can go beyond what the task force was doing. And I would ask, and if you run into any resistance, then let me know, because we're here to take care of resistance.
I would ask
I'd like for you to go in and talk to the people in the workhouse as well as expand what we're doing.
May I ask a question, Alderperson? The mayor for the last one made the determination for a chair. That chair stepped down. The task force selected its chair. Are you going to follow? Are you going to select the chair of that subcommittee, or will the subcommittee perform that action?
Vice Chairman Boyd, what are your thoughts on that? Because I don't have a thought on it.
I think we should ask the clerk. I'm thinking that an alderperson would be chairman of the subcommittee.
I think you might have to be.
I'd want to get clarification from the clerk to make sure.
So why don't the subcommittee all meet and talk, and then I want to say Jeffrey, I know I'm supposed to say Alderman Boyd. Why don't you work with that and figure that one out and decide amongst the subcommittee how we're going to proceed. So I'm going to just go down. I want to just call the roll of the committee to see if they're fine with the subcommittee, and then I'd like that subcommittee to move forward, at least under the direction right now of Vice Chairman Boyd, because he's good at finding rules. So let me just go down. I don't have a problem with it. Vice Chairman Boyd, you're fine with the committee the way it's set up then, subcommittee?
Mhm.
And then Alderwoman Carol Howard, are you fine with that?
I'm a little bit confused. Who's part of the subcommittee?
It would be everybody that was on the task force.
I'm not sure who that was.
So that was Pam Walker,
Okay.
Adolfo Pruitt, who's with the NAACP, Reverend Darrell Gray, he chaired it all, and Reverend Charles Norris was actually a really nice guy. We got to meet and talk and get our parking validated together, so it worked out kind of nice. I'm not on it. Tracy Stanton, who is someone that at one point was a guest of ours at one of our facilities, and Senator Nasheed, who was also on the task force. And then we added 2 of the aldermen, and you're welcome to be on it if you would like. We added Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard as well as Vice Chairman Boyd. And any of the alder that feel like they want to serve on it, I'm not even, I wouldn't even be opposed to if someone outside, as long as they're on the Board of Aldermen, would want to serve on that also.
I thought, I don't know, I'm confused. I thought you were talking about a subcommittee of of this committee to serve on.
It would be a subcommittee of this. We can go outside.
Oh,
A
okay,
subcommittee can go outside of the alderman.
okay,
It has to be probably chaired by an alderman, but it certainly can go outside of. And what they would have is the power of the, whatever power we have, they would have the power of the Public Safety Committee to help open doors.
okay.
And I
All
would
right.
hope that the mayor's office and everybody would cooperate with us.
Okay.
Um,
All right, thank you.
Would you want to serve on that?
Well, I thought I expressed that, but that's
I'm
okay.
sorry, I didn't, my
That's okay.
mind's all over the place. Who knows?
I think there's plenty of people. That's fine. I can sit in on any meeting as needed.
And
Okay.
then there'll be meetings that we'll have to have, like,
Okay.
I just want to make sure we hit the floor running and the new
Yeah.
system.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so Alderwoman Tamika Howard. And I think she had to step out.
That's Tamika Hubbard.
I mean, Hubbard, why did I say? It's been a long morning for me, I'm sorry. Alderwoman Tamika Hubbard. Alderman John Collins Muhammad.
No concerns, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and Alderwoman Pam Boyd. And she may have stepped out. And Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard, you should be fine. I know you're on it. So here's what we'll do then. We'll open it up to all the other alderpersons that are here. I don't really have the list in front of me. Just turn your cameras on so I can see who's out there. And
Alderwoman,
I see Alderwoman Christine Gracias.
Yeah, her hand is up.
Yeah, and I'm just looking, I don't see anybody else. Alderwoman Gracias, you're certainly welcome to speak, talk, do whatever you have in mind, and then we'll have Alderwoman Rice right after you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see everyone today. I appreciate all the time you've put in to the work on the CJC. I just had a quick question about process to make sure that you were accomplishing what it is you were intending to accomplish. I know we don't have any rules about subcommittees in our Board of Aldermanic rules, and we sort of informally do subcommittees from time to time on issues like Prop S funding. And so I was just curious if you had considered, not that folks couldn't be continuing to meet and have discussions, but the fact that in order to establish a special committee, we have to do that by a resolution of the full board. And if we were going to grant subpoena power, we would have to explicitly state that in that resolution.
No, because the chairman of a committee has the right to appoint a subcommittee. And as far as subpoena power, every one of us, every committee has subpoena power. So at any point, and we did that during the I can't remember what committee that was. Alderman Boyd might be able to help me on that, but
That's not correct. Committees do not have subpoena power. Subpoena power will have to be requested through resolution, like the Alderwoman said, and voted on by 15 members of the Board of Aldermen in order to inherit subpoena powers.
okay. But we do have the right to put a subcommittee together.
That's true.
So, and I'm not worried about the subpoena power. If we have to, then I'm gonna have to talk to the president. I know we're gonna have some meetings coming up. So I'm not concerned about that. I think at this point, we need to keep moving forward and not throw roadblocks in the way. I think it's more important that we move forward and address whatever roadblocks come up than to sit here and say, well, we don't know that we should do this. Well, let's wait. Well, the full board's not going to meet. I want to keep moving forward because the people that are our guests in our facilities need to be treated in a way that's humane. So I'm moving forward, and if somebody disagrees, then they can just disagree. But we're going to move forward, and the subcommittee is established, and that's what we're going to do. And they're going to come back and they're going to report to the Public Safety Committee because I don't want this delayed another day. And I can't believe anybody would feel that we should sit back and wait and hope that next meeting, then we have a full board meeting to discuss whether or not we have subpoena power or not. We can do that next, but right now, the important thing is that this committee moves forward, that we don't put ourselves in a holding pattern. And I do know, because I checked, that I have the right to establish a subcommittee.
Okay, Chairman Vaccaro, just to be clear, I was not trying to be obstructionist. I was just wanting to make sure the committee was able to undertake the work in the way that you are articulating. You thought it was best to move forward. And I don't see anything about subcommittees in our rules, and it's pretty explicit about special committees. But thank you for the opportunity to talk, and thanks again to all of you for the time and work you've put into this so far.
Thank you. Alderwoman Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, echoing my colleagues' comments, it's good to see you all, and thank you all for the immense amount of work that you've undertaken over the last few weeks here. The report is thorough. It is actually, I mean, I will say I'm grateful for the depth that went into this report, knowing how short of a time you had to put this together. So the recommendations, I think, are very important. And my particular concerns at the moment are having sat in on a meeting of the CJCC and knowing what work they're already doing around pretrial detention, on processing through police departments, processing of detainees through police departments instead of through the Justice Center, and some other specific areas that some of their subcommittees have established, making sure that any connection between a subcommittee of this committee and the CJCC is working closely in partnership, because there's the whole essence of the CJCC is to bring our siloed departments together and bring representatives from each of those departments together to solve those problems in a way that actually addresses them system-wide and not just siloed. So I would just encourage, I know Alderman Boyd has attended, and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard has also attended those meetings. And so the more closely we can partner together with that work, I think the more effective we will be going forward as well. And maybe if we find that there are struggles with a subcommittee of aldermen and folks who are not aldermen, that maybe even the CJCC is an appropriate place to have some of these discussions, because those are already publicly noticed meetings. Anyway, that structure was set up through our ordinances for a purpose. And so just want to continue to empower them for the work that they're doing. And I know the report also, says the more we lean into the work that the CJCC is doing, the more effective they are. And that's everything from body cameras to electronic monitoring to all of the issues that we're facing the Justice Center as well. So just want to encourage that connection there. The other specific concern that I have on an immediate basis is medical care in CJCC. There was already a lawsuit that that declared that a detainee have a shower. And it was the first time that this detainee had been offered a shower in, I think, several months that he's been at the Justice Center. And, not that we need to get into ongoing litigation here, but it is clear that there's a discrepancy between what we're being told is the medical care of detainees and what the detainees are experiencing themselves. And the report notes that as well. But that seems to be a very urgent need. And I would hope that your subcommittee would take that on quickly, an evaluation of the medical services that are available and how they're being utilized, what that access actually looks like.
Well, and I agree, and that goes into how long someone could be held in the a holding cell. Some people apparently been held 30 days in something that it's not meant to be more than an overnight thing. But
yeah.
Also, the reason for the subcommittee is everybody on this committee worked. And I mean, they worked harder than I did, but they worked day, night, weekends. And once they turn a report in, it's dead, it's done, it's over. My concern was we have to keep moving forward. All these things are going to have to be a board bill. The establishment of the actual oversight committee right now, just to keep people together, we're going to keep moving forward by making a subcommittee. The establishment of an ordinance that says how long someone can be in a holding cell. All these things are going to come up, and there's 63 recommendations, and I'm not sure we're going to make 63 ordinances, but I want to make sure that when we hit the new session, that we hit it running, that we're not then sitting there going, okay, well, we're going to start to put together an oversight committee. That's going to take 2, 3, 4 months because you're going to have to get names from every section of the city. They're going to have to go to the mayor. Then the Board of Aldermen is going to have to meet with all of them. Then they're going to have to approve all of them. By that time, nobody will even remember there was a task force or there was 63 recommendations. That's why I'm making that a subcommittee, of the Board of Aldermen. It's holding this together. It's so that when we get together on April, the end of April there, when we start with a full head of steam. We may have 4 or 5 or 6 board bills put together prior to, and I'm not opposed to if you want to sit in on that subcommittee. I am absolutely not opposed to that. You want to be on the subcommittee? That's fine. The subcommittee is going to come back and they're going to have all their recommendations. I understand that the full Board of Aldermen are the ones that are going to have to act on it, as well as, there'll be a board bill, it'll go to the public safety or wherever it's appropriate. It's up to us to be ready to rock and roll when we get in the new session, not sit down and debate. Well, this is somebody I don't want on the committee. Well, then I want to interview another person, and I don't want to see. I want to hit the floor running. So we're not gonna. We don't have the ability to make a board bill because we don't have even enough meetings left to make a board bill right now. But what I don't want to do is, I don't want to see where I wasted 2 weeks or whatever it was in my life while everybody was on break. Me and Alderman Boyd and all these other folks that sat on this committee were working weekends and nights and days because they said, oh, you got to have this all by the 15th. And so that's the idea of why I said, look, we're going to make a subcommittee. We're going to rock and roll on this, and we're not slowing down. We're going to hit the floor running in the new session. So if you want to serve on that, let me know. We can add your name and just work with Alderman Boyd, and they're going to set up with this group the meetings. I'd like this group to go into the minimum security, or people refer to as the workhouse. I'd like them to get more access into the Justice Center that they didn't have. I'd like to see us moving forward so that when we really come back, we have real recommendations on how we make things better for the people in there. Again, you know, I'm not a close the workhouse. I'm a how do we treat people and how, you know, because again, I don't like the idea of sending people, but if they're confined, we have to treat them with some sort of dignity. And I think about if I was confined, how I would want to be treated. I don't care where they put me, but I want to be treated like a person. I don't have to take a crap, and I'm not supposed to use words like that. So I'll say, I'm not supposed to defecate or have to urinate in front of 16 other people jammed in a cell with me that all of us haven't had a shower. I don't want to be in that holding cell where I need my medicine for my diabetes. You know, I don't want to be in that holding cell for 2 days, 3, 4, 5, 10, 12 days. That's like the number one thing I'm going to start to get put together and have written. And I'm hoping that the subcommittee helps us have all this stuff put together so that on day one, we got legislation ready to roll. But I'm rambling and I'm sorry, but that's the whole idea of it. And if you're willing and wanting to serve on that subcommittee, just let Alderman Boyd know, because I'm open to that. And the more input, the better, so that we can come in on day one that all the different factions in the Board of Aldermen, that we're all rowing in the same direction on this one. It isn't about, well, we shouldn't make any rules about how we treat people because we're going to close the building anyway. I think we can have different fights, but I think how we treat people has got to be the number one priority, no matter where they're at. And there's tons of stuff in there. That place is, anyway, I'm just rambling. If you would like to serve on that committee, please get with Alderman Boyd. But that's the object of why I'm holding this together.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that. And I think it is I think that the work needs to continue in the next few weeks before we come back to session as well. So I'm just advocating for the CJCC because I know we have the specialized folks in those departments in the city already meeting together to work on some of the issues that were identified in the report. So if there's work already being done, it would save your committee, your subcommittee, some work to build off of what is there and to work together with those folks. So that's just what I was trying to.
I would hope Alderman Boyd, who I will say is much smarter than me, probably already.
I'm great. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak today. Appreciate it.
Alderman Boyd, you look like you're going to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'll put together some guiding principles for the subcommittee and the purpose so that everybody is clear. And give me about a week or so to get that together. Because contrary to popular belief, I'm actually not the smartest one at the Board of Aldermen. So I want to make sure I talk to the right people to get the right, buy-in so that we can be as successful as possible.
Thank you. I would say, is there any other aldermen out there that did want to speak?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, if I just have a comment real briefly. I was just listening to the conversation about the jurisdiction of establishing a subcommittee, and our Board of Aldermen rules states that when we do not have any rules that govern a particular topic, we move on to congressional rules. And congressional rules do state that subcommittees can size in different party and size ratios, and it's determined by the full committee under the leadership of that committee leadership. And it does say that subcommittees can consist of members of Congress and or members of the executive branch. So I would assume that since these members of the task force are appointed by the mayor, that they will be considered members of the executive branch. So if we dub those down to local terms, then they are in a full rights to serve on subcommittees in the legislative body, the Board of Aldermen, if it is deemed appropriate by the parent committee. And that is the exact language that is used in the congressional rules that I'm looking at right now, the parent committee. So the parent committee will be the Public Safety Committee under your leadership. And if this committee approves that, then the committee is justified. I just wanted to make that clear because my residents in the 21st Ward are watching, and I want to make sure that they have the correct information. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You could let your residents know that I love John Muhammad, and that's why I love John.
And everybody
he's
knows I
always
love you
checking
more.
stuff. John's my friend. I should say alderman. All the formalities. So if there's no other alder people, and I'm going to put this in Vice Chairman Boyd's hands. I'm going to ask Reverend Gray or any of the task force to any comments or anything you want to make. And then Alderman Boyd, I'm going to, even though I'll be in the meeting, I'm going to let you, since you're kind of putting that part together, I'm just going to let you close the meeting out. I'll be here. I'm just going to be listening.
I just have some just a couple of closing comments. And first of all, again, I want people to understand how important this particular moment is. A lot of the task force members took a lot of criticism for participating on the task force. People who believe that this was just an opportunity for the administration to just, as in their words, kick the can down the road. And members of the task force heard those criticisms, but also rose to the challenge and the opportunity to do something positive and significant, and to respond to the concerns and the cries and the calls of those who occupied the CJC. And so we took our responsibility serious. We tried to stay above the political fray and just deal with the mechanics and the issues that were in front of us. It is my personal hope, and I understood what Alderwoman Christina was talking about, at the end of the day, that we do focus on those 13 urgent recommendations as a subcommittee, and then look at the other recommendations because they have been deemed as urgent. That I agree with the partnership with CJCC and all other entities that are involved. The problem that we found was that people were not working in partnership. And so I think that, as Dr. Pruitt said and others, we support that and encourage that 100%. And then finally, my hope that as Alderman Boyd looks at the terms of reference, and I hope that whatever he submits as terms of reference, I'm sure, knowing how he has worked within our task force, that he would be open to other members of the subcommittee adding on to those terms of reference if we find that there is a necessity to do so, but that the creation of an independent civilian oversight board be one of those destinations, one of those things that comes out of the work of the subcommittee as well. I think that we've made it very clear that independent review board could work to, as John Chasnoff has said, more long-term. And so I'm excited and encouraged about moving forward. I'm encouraged to work with the task force members and those that have the group that has been expanded, particularly with Alderwoman Howard and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard and other alder people. So I just want to say I think that this was a gigantic next step, because people needed to know that the work that we have done as a task force is work that has not been in vain. So thank you very much, Alderman Vaccaro, and I look forward to working with members of the subcommittee.
I was leaving this all in charge now of Alderman, of the vice chair, so he's gonna close the meeting out. Does any of the other subcommittee, I mean, any of the other task force or subcommittee have comments? Seeing none, I'm gonna let Alderman, the vice chairman, close it out, but I do want to thank everybody. And when I first saw the group, I'm thinking, oh, this is just gonna be a one-sided, but I really got to know everybody a little bit more and enjoyed working with everyone and look forward to the future working together, that we're gonna fix this. And these things will exist. We're gonna do this. Otherwise, we've just wasted our time. Anyway, but thank you all. And I'm gonna let the vice chairman close the meeting out in case he has any more comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really don't have a lot to add from what I've said earlier. Again, thank you to all the task force members who have participated and who will be moving on to further participate on the subcommittee. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that the Public Safety Committee adjourn.
I'll second that. So
Your can, you could use a soda can. And I'm gluing this
Hi.
gray piece of felt.
Bye, everybody.
okay.